Amazing. And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of LunarCrush Live. Today, we're going to be with Mantra. We got JP backstage, old guest that we've had on before. We were just chatting with him backstage, August 31st, 2020. It's just like insane, which feels like, a decade or more of time in the crypto space. But excited to be chatting today. I know we've been, this market's been kind of crazy. A lot of, not as many live streams happening, a lot of live streams talking about politics and all sorts of other things. I'm excited to get, and dive a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole with some people that have been building in the space and talking about the actual narratives that are happening in the industry and who the builders are. So, John, what's up with you? How are you doing?
And that just what you said is refreshing. I mean, the feed is now just political X 24/7, and the really incredible stuff seems to be getting lost, even though it appears to be increasing at the moment. A lot of the activity around crypto is going up, starting to. So that's exciting. So
Yes, really exciting. And if you're listening, we do these spaces. We do not charge for these spaces. We bring on fun, exciting people that have dedicated their careers to the industry. So with that, go sign up for LunarCrush, right? Get in there. I think we've got a promo code that's probably out there. Do a little Google. I'm sure you'll find one. If not, send me a DM and I'll hook you up with a promo code on X. Just hit me up at Jovez and we'll get you signed up. So make that happen. With that, let's bring them up. Let's start chatting. JP, what's up,
Awesome,
my man?
guys. Good to see you.
Good to see
you guys.
You are killing it, JP. Great to see you.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
Yeah, which is we're not going to talk price or anything like that on the show, but except for this one moment.
I'll toss price. I'll talk price.
Well, gotta say, you may have the top performing crypto asset out there. I don't know if I've seen anything go from 17 million to over 1 billion in the last year, and Ohm is up 5,200%. 5,200%. Well, while we're in this environment where there are alts that are down 90%, anywhere between 50 to 90%, I'd probably say is somewhere in the ballpark of a lot of alts. You are up 5,200%. And we're not going to dig into price too much. We're going to dig into why. So very, very exciting. So welcome.
Thank you, sir. I mean, it was crazy. We've been building Mantra for a long time. Obviously, as Joe mentioned, we did our first, foray onto LunarCrush nearly 4 years ago to the day. A lot's changed. We've gone through a lot of ups and downs. And currently what we're building is really, resonating with the market. We're really excited about that. But I think the one thing that is clear to me, at least, is that this is predicated on like the last 18, 24 months of, building when, frankly, shit wasn't really going well. And, now we're able to kind of, hit the right timing with the right, narrative, the right positioning, the right people behind us. And it's just been, it's been a crazy year. I mean, honestly, my life is like changing before my eyes, day in, day out. And it's just, quite honestly, an emotional roller coaster, but it's an exciting thing to be a part of.
Anytime you have that much action, there's, whether it's from a professional standpoint, personal standpoint, you have to stay focused and, it's sure. Like they always say like entrepreneurship. I think it was like Sam Altman that actually talked about it. It's startups. It's all about momentum, right? Like, I think that's kind of like, as an entrepreneur, you're searching for momentum and, you might have some lulls at different points in your career in what you're building. And it's probably because you don't have the momentum and you're almost, you start to question like, oh, is this what I should be doing? Or what should be happening? And then all of a sudden you get some momentum and you're like, oh my God, I love this. I'm going to just keep going forever. Right. And it's actually that. And so you're experiencing that at like an exponential magnitude right now.
It's actually funny. I think I found this is what I meant to do for my life when it was going completely wrong. And when nothing was working. And honestly, having been in the space for some time, having obviously a lot of ups and downs, like when it really was really, really tough and, we didn't know if we were going to make it. It was that time when I was like, this is what I, excuse my language, fucking love. And, when you can kind of really like just hone in on the things that are, honestly, it's like this idea of embracing the suck. My dad always says you got to embrace the suck. And if you really like it when it sucks and you're still enjoying your life, you can kind of really take and cling on to that, adversity and that experience. And then when, things are going a little bit better, honestly, sometimes that's even harder because you're not used to the success or you're not used to all the things going right. And it's kind of funny because, on the face of things, from Mantra's perspective, outward looking in, like everything looks good. We're over $1 billion market cap, growing fast, one of the best performing tokens out there. And honestly, completely honestly, I'm like the least satisfied I've ever been with the business, like in its entirety, entire history. Not because we're not performing well, not because the team's not doing a good job, but just because now it's like you reset your mental, like, I guess, threshold of what you want to expect and what you want to achieve with the business. So like it is this really kind of interesting, dynamic that we're going through right now where things are going really well. But at the same time, I'm like so much hungrier for like what's coming. And that's really the exciting thing as well. Just that like constant appetite for growth and for, continued progress and development.
Feels like we could do a full hour on going through how things suck. There's
I can talk about it all day.
there's there's a lot of people that are going to watch this and listen to this and wonder, well, what are some of those things that you went through that were difficult? Because I'm sure that there's a lot of people going through those same things now with, their startups, their mature businesses, all sorts of, even personal. Like, what are some of those things that you've had to deal with?
I mean, a lot, man. Like, from struggling to raise money for, God, like almost 2 years. We went to raise money when Luna was crashing. I was like in my general counsel's apartment as Luna literally was imploding, and I was a big Luna bag holder as well. So that was a fun day. So struggles with raising money, interpersonal relationships with co-founders and partners. Just the trauma of having to restructure a team, like significantly restructure. I mean, literally, like our TGE was August 18th, 2020. And we had our third birthday, so actually when they came on the show, it was like right after we first launched the first time. So last year, August, which is, just a few weeks away, at the party, I was like bawling, talking to everyone because I knew I had to lay off half the company on Monday. Yeah. And no one else knew that. And, less than a year later, look where we're at. So like shit like that is just something, it's like, this emotional roller coaster that's honestly very, very, very challenging to deal with. And, and then there's a multitude of other things, right? And, there's the doubts and there's the worries and then there's, concerns and all kinds of stuff. But honestly, through that whole experience, obviously working with external supporters and, friends and family and, coaches and all kinds of stuff, I honestly have found like this is just what I was put on this planet to do. I kind of have this self-realization that, I have a certain set of skills that are good for a founder. But I also am just like so motivated and hungry about what we're building and excited about the team that we have and the problem that we're solving and what we're focused on, that it's like there's nothing else in life that matters to me. Literally, Mantra is my life. John's life is Mantra, and Mantra is, it all is one thing. And that was only derived through the struggle, I would say. And coming out the other side, like living to tell the tale, kind of just opens up a huge realm of possibilities. And that's, again, one of the things that's so exciting about what we're doing, like all these partnerships with RWAs and, all these, this narrative game that's, we're kind of at, leading the pack with. It's just the tip of the freaking iceberg. Literally, like, the space itself is just the tip of the iceberg, but also like there's so many things we haven't even brought to the market yet. So it's just a really exciting position to be in, and honestly, I'm just super humbled about it. I mean, it's the opportunity of a lifetime, and it's good to be able to talk about it as well. I don't get to talk about it like this, in this level of, I guess, like openness than as I normally would. So I'm enjoying this conversation so far.
Well, and everyone appreciates that. Let's be real here. Like we have guests that come on, we go to conferences, and it's hype, hype, hype. It's there's not a lot of reality out there, and it's obviously, as you're stating, it's not only hard to deal with, it's hard to manage through it, it's hard to grow from there. It's hard to it's not straight up. There's almost no world in which a startup just goes, oh yeah, that was easy. Like it's really interesting. So thanks for sharing that. Seriously.
Appreciate that.
There's also
Appreciate
this
that.
idea around like the industry that we're in, and like, like in startup, you've got, even a regular like, equity-backed startup out of Silicon Valley, there's still like a 99% chance that that company fails, right? And I think
Yeah.
sometimes people don't translate that to crypto and Web3, even though it's literally the same model, right? Except it's, 99% are probably going to fail. It's just, it's a lot more public facing, right? Because if you do have a token and you've got 40,000 holders of that token, right? You've got 40,000 people that are like, hey man, what's going on? Right. And normally as a founder, you might not deal with that until you go public and you're, it's series D or F or whatever else it may be. And you have an 8-year run rate of dealing with, a board and going through that process. And so you've got people that are really just like jumping into the deep end of a pool. But moreover, you also have this kind of fraudulent side, like you just talked about Luna and some other things are out there that we kind of sit, you're sitting adjacent to, and you're like, hey, if you're a founder that's trying to build a quality business with innovative technology and you're trying to innovate on business model, you're trying to innovate on technology. And, you also have this fine line of like, hey, there's some people that are right next to you that are not doing it the right way. And then if, you fail, it's like you potentially run a risk of like somehow getting bundled in with that other side, when in reality, you're just like, I'm just trying to run this business and trying to innovate. It's not, like I was saying before, it's not for the faint of heart. We are in a very, kind of cutthroat, interesting industry. And so it's, not that I'm discounting anyone's, road to, getting to build a startup, but like you definitely are kind of crazy to be building in this industry in the way that we're all building. And so you've got to really know what you're focused on and stay focused on building something that matters. And, it's not always going to work out. So, hats off to you as well for, staying and fighting the good fight and being someone that's trying to, stay focused on their product and stay focused on the industry and, adapting to the industry. And, real world assets, it's like, it might be great for you to like to define that for people, in your terms, like what is a real world asset? Like, how is it like, I kind of thought like maybe that was a security token back in the day. And then now it's like, it's something maybe a little bit different. And it'd be great to hear from you. Like, what is a real world asset?
First off, I appreciate the initial sentiment. It means a lot. As it pertains to kind of RWA's real world assets, I mean, I say very, very adamantly that as much as we're kind of like calling ourselves a real world asset L1, I actually hate the term. I hate the term RWA. We have been, or myself personally, have been looking at this concept of tokenization since before RWA was a thing, at least in crypto. RWA is still a thing in TradFi. It's risk-weighted asset, right? Which is also why it's a bad acronym, confusing. But even before Mantra started, we had done a tokenization deal where we tokenized the NBA player's contract under a US Reg D private placement, and there was no technology. It was completely manual. There was no launch pads. There was no anything. And that was going well until COVID happened, and then no one wanted to buy a basketball player shitcoin. So like, I think my whole founder story has just been like honestly trying and things just not working out, but learning a lot along the way. And taking that all into what we're doing now is kind of why I think we're in a unique position with real world assets, or just this concept of asset tokenization, because you can take all these learnings from the STO days, the DeFi summer, obviously the last bear market we had, which was kind of brutal and had its own kind of learnings that came from it, and now it's all playing into this position now that we're in, which is focused on building an infrastructure and application layer that allows for all different types of assets to come on chain. So when you're talking about real world assets, it really is just this idea of tokenizing anything, honestly. I think it's kind of weird to say, like, why isn't Bitcoin or Ethereum a real thing? It's a digital asset, of course, but like it's kind of real in my life, and I'm pretty sure it's real in your guys' lives too, right?
Yeah, like what's the difference
Um,
between real world and fake world assets, I guess.
that's what yeah, exactly. So it's just really not a really good acronym to describe what we're really focusing on. But if you just think about more this broader concept of tokenization, is really how we're thinking about it. Is how do we bring products and services into the hands of users that are conveyed in the form of a tokenized delivery mechanism. And that could be real estate, it could be securities, it could be um, IP and content, it could be anything, honestly. I think we're agnostic in what we're looking at from the perspective of RWAs and what we would want to tokenize from our perspective as both a layer one and an exchange where these things can trade, or a secondary market. Like, as long as someone wants to buy it, invest in it, trade it, and it ticks the box of regulatory compliance, and it actually adds marginal value to the end user as well as to the asset issuer or originator, then it's something that we want to look at. And whatever that may be, we're kind of open to that. So I think it's a very exciting kind of landscape to be in, because effectively it's just basically tokenizing finance and bringing finance on chain, which is one of the taglines that we use. But it's really true. It's like blockchains are perfect financial ledgers, and honestly, when done correctly, tokens can be great uses for incentive mechanisms. They can be smart contracts in general are great uses for automation, for creating a more trustless environment. And it's just kind of really finding that like fine middle ground, or fine line or middle ground, where you can actually basically attract both the crypto native population of today, but then build for something that people don't even know is going to be on chain tomorrow. And that's honestly where we're really focusing on, because it hasn't worked before. Like, STOs didn't work. There really hasn't been retail adoption of this stuff yet, and that's a big problem to solve, in my opinion. So that's why we're going after it.
I guess on that note of those things failing, guess we can say that. Like, why did they fail? Like, and why is this all happening now? I mean, why was there not real world asset tokenization a decade ago? Why is this such a big deal right now? Is it BlackRock? Is there a
I mean,
narrative?
it helps.
Yeah.
Uncle Larry helps.
But why now?
I mean, I think there's a few things, right? So it's kind of, in my opinion, that we're at this, convergence of the technology actually being something that's usable. And even today, like, on-chain technology, DeFi technology is still not at a place where the average user can use it. Like, the average person in the world, trying to play around with ledgers, trying to, do all these, these things on chain is a challenge. Like, you couldn't tell your grandmother how to do that, right? It would take a lot of work. So there's a long way to go in terms of advancing this technology stack, but it's gotten a lot better. So that's one thing. You do have this mindshare thing, which is supported by, BlackRock ETF validation of Bitcoin, or Bitcoin ETF in general. BlackRock and Larry Fink coming out and saying, tokenization is a thing, and BUIDL, and all these things are like really good, validations of the space and the technology, which people take pretty seriously. It's freaking BlackRock, right? Like, it's one of the biggest players in the game that's saying that this is the future. That means something. You have, in certain countries, not all countries, but in certain markets and jurisdictions, the regulatory frameworks are actively evolving and engaging with people, engaging with builders like ourselves, to build something that is on chain natively, that is self-custodial, that doesn't allow for an FTX to happen again, but in a form that's regulated, that has some degree of compliance framework. Like, these things are all coming together now. At the same time, frankly, you have people like, I guess, us, who have kind of seen all these things. I mean, my whole, like, literally the first job I ever had in crypto, we wanted to build a centralized exchange that tokenized all different types of assets under one roof, and this was in 2017. And we thought that KYC was a good thing, for a centralized exchange in Asia, and that was a definitely a bug, not a feature back then. um, so like it's kind of just the culmination of all these things going hand in hand and learning from it, and now it's all coming together at once. And don't get me wrong, there's still a long way to go, right? And I think the other thing that's quite important is, in my opinion, we have figured out a way to create a viable business model which is predicated not on extracting fees from token issuers, but rather to create different use cases that sustain a broader ecosystem. That's why the L1 part of this is incredibly important. If you're just thinking about it from a pure tokenization platform perspective, the business model is more and more assets, which means your quality of asset is going to be lower and lower over time, right? We didn't have high quality assets the last time. We didn't have secondary markets, and we didn't have retail adoption at all.
Yeah,
Those are
there was
major
no value,
problems.
and there was no value add.
Nothing.
Right, it was a different type.
Nothing.
I mean, you bring up, like, and we talk a lot about UX and experience and, like, getting our grandmas to utilize this stuff. I will say, I think it's just use case and disrupting the right industry, right part of the industry, right? Like when people say, "Oh, crypto, like use case with like payments," it's like, well, I've Venmo or Revolut or Zelle or all these things that are like actually like pretty easy to use and have like widespread adoption, right? But like, a use case with real world assets, like I was helping a family friend, like they wanted to buy a home and they needed to kind of prove that they had a certain amount of assets to the HOA in order to, make sure that they can purchase the home. And, they had those assets, but one of the pieces of those assets was in a trust that owned a home of their deceased mother. And so it was like, well, how do they go and prove? It was like, well, you need death certificates. And then there were like 6 addendums to the trust. And then it's like, oh, who paid the taxes on that house? There's all of these things. And I was like, actually, that experience would be way harder than teaching someone how to use MetaMask. Like I would much have rather taught someone how to use a private key and know what 12 words are than be like, hey, how many lawyers do you got to talk to prove this? And then you got to call like the county. And then the county's like, who are you that's calling me? Wait, oh, I got to fly to, to Louisiana to pick up the, and go to the county to pick this up now. Like I got to get on a plane or like teach someone 12, like what a mnemonic is. And it's like, I think I'd rather just teach someone what a mnemonic is. And like, I think we're getting to a point where if you just disrupt the right industry, there are ways where it's like even crypto and where it fits now is way easier than what the paperwork and everything else is out there. And like,
I agree with that.
I think we're just finally getting to a place that, they always say like politics is, 20 years behind like rational thought. And it's like, we now have potentially a millennial on a national ticket here in the US. Like, I didn't think that was going to happen for 10 more years. Right. So we've like jumped 10 years forward. It's like, I don't know, maybe this is our time.
I mean, it's interesting. Like the differences between how certain jurisdictions that we've looked at are operating and the speed that they're operating has definitely influenced our strategy. Because, when we first, launched Mantra back in the, DeFi summer days, we, launched it, had some success, built out a number of different products. I mean, you guys were, there from literally day one, basically. And then, DeFi bubble popped, DeFi 1.0 popped in basically like spring of 2021, listed on Binance right around that time. So that was like great timing, honestly, saving grace. Thank God to CZ for that. And we had to go back to the drawing board. So initially we were looking at like, how do we create, permissioned on-chain, like asset tokenization for the US market? And we started looking at at that market really significantly, and it just exploded so far down. Like obviously with Luna, FTX, all this other stuff, and still today, right? It's like crypto is a political issue for a reason in the US, and the reason it's a political issue is because there's been really little like ability to actually operate there effectively as a builder, as a company. But people don't know what the rules are. They don't know what they can do. Everyone's worried about getting in trouble. And the rest of the world has leapfrogged that. So we had to look elsewhere on what we could actually do. And we ended up looking in places like the UAE and Dubai, and eventually that has, not that it's easy there. Honestly, we thought we were going to go there and get a license, and 2 years later we still don't have the license because it takes a long time, and they are asking for more stuff all the time. Although this is imminent, so that's a good thing. But it just goes to show that, like, even in a place that's much more progressive as it pertains to crypto regulation. I mean, they created a brand new crypto regulator, and also have a much more, I guess, like, very top-down ability to say, hey, central government says this is the way. You got to do it, and that's an advantage to be able to actually enforce things and do things properly and fast. But it still takes time. So your point is exactly right. Like, the difference between the crypto mindset of, like, these things need to happen fast, and almost this, like, kind of like attention deficit bubble that we're in all the time, always chasing the next high kind of thing, doesn't really work when it comes to compliance. And I think that's one of the things that makes real world assets so challenging, is you have to play the long game here, because it is just naturally a long game. And, like, crypto cycles don't necessarily match up with compliance and politics and regulation and all these other things, which just naturally take time to implement. So, like I said, we've been spending years doing this. My whole life in crypto has been trying to work towards this, 7+ years, and we're still not even there. Like, it's still just the tip of the iceberg. So you got to have, like, a really long-term mindset for this stuff. It's a little bit of a weird thing in crypto, I think, because some of these other things are much more, like, they play out much more cyclically, whereas this is, like, in my opinion, the golden, the holy grail, the golden goose, if you get it right.
You mentioned regulation, and if everything's on chain, and I guess, how do you see that? How do you see, like, let's say the UAE figures this all out, you're fully licensed to operate, their assets are tokenized in the UAE. What do you think does the government need their own application to monitor compliance on chain? Like, how do you see that kind of playing out?
So I firmly believe that the application of regulatory enforcement happens at the application layer, not the protocol layer, right? So where people are interacting with assets, they're investing, they're trading, they're doing these type of things, is actually really, or on and off ramping, and as it pertains to crypto and fiat kind of thing, that's really where the regulators care. Other than how do you sell tokens at the like, if you're layer 1 or layer 2 and you sell your token, of course the regulators do care about that. But otherwise, they're really mostly concerned at this stage in time about the application layer. So it's when we first started building in the UAE and looking at what type of regulation we would need to even operate in our business model, which at that time was like, how do we create a digital asset exchange that could support trading of all these different products? It turned out that we needed to have a brokerage license, an exchange license, and an asset management and investment management license. And what that basically meant is we could do AMM style swapping, we could do, like, central limit order book exchange, and we could do, like, structured products or vaults or staking, right? So understanding, like, the translation of these real world legislations and regulatory frameworks into, like, crypto speak was one of the challenges. But then you had to figure out, how do you actually bring that on chain in a way that's actually usable, that keeps the government and the regulators happy and comfortable. And that actually required literally just going, straight to, like, basically square one and building something purpose built from scratch. We obviously utilize the Cosmos SDK, which we believe is an amazing tech stack to build blockchains on. And then ended up building our own custom modules on top of it that support identity management, token issuance, and token governance, and then compliance. What we call a compliance SDK, which is basically like a governance framework for people to very easily permission access at the token, at the pool, at the application level, and all these things kind of go hand in hand. But still, even then, communicating that in a way that the government or the regulators understand is definitely a challenge. And it's an educational process. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of trust. And, honestly speaking, until we really, like, we, raised some money that was led by a UAE or Abu Dhabi based fintech VC called Sharuk Partners at the beginning of this year. And honestly, without that happening, like a lot of the credibility that we now have would have been very, very challenging. These guys are backed by like 9 sovereign wealth funds, Mubadala, ADQ, Saudi PIF. So like super, super institutional capital. They finally took a bet on us, which was, again, an amazing, amazing thing for us. But until that happened, like you're still just another crypto project. And in many cases, the regulator's like, well, who the hell are you? And what do you want? And even in a place that's supposed to be regulatorily friendly to crypto, like there's still concerns about, what are you doing, what are you operating, and how does the technology work? So like being able to translate that is really, really challenging. And you really got to speak both languages, right? Like you got to be able to go into a room with regulators and be able to speak to them. And then honestly, you got to go on a Twitter space and speak to, anon, degenerates, and have, these type of like conversations. And I hope that I'm reasonably good at that.
That in of itself is its own skill, right? You live in two different
100%.
worlds completely. One requires a suit, one requires cat memes. So it's not easy.
Exactly.
Not everyone has that.
It's the epitome of my Twitter account.
I love that. It's like, do you speak cat meme, and do you also like speak, Keynesian economics? Like, where does it fit? It just is fun. You mentioned just looking at your site here, like you were kind of check marking like all of the different licenses that you need, and I can see it kind of translating into like the order book and the vaults, the staking, right, and then like the liquidity pool, like in farms, and kind of figuring that out. And obviously, you guys did a great job here, with just design, and it seems very simple. Like just looking at it, I'm kind of like, oh man, like it seems very easy. I was like, oh, I have a development that I'm going to be building, and I wanted to, and I'm a forward thinking developer, and I want to maybe try to tokenize like a 60 homes or something maybe that I'm buying, or like or that I'm building. It's like it seems like a perfect place for someone to come almost and like point and click and like figure out how to like have like large scale like real world assets, but like large scale like developments in a sense. And then it also seems like a place where it's like if I'm like an art dealer and I want to potentially like fractionalize something that like I own, or if I am like I like have a I'm a personal like I own a like, an art collection on my own. I'm like, shoot, I need some capital. Like I don't, and maybe I'm not going to go find like some 80-page like legal thing and go to some insurance company to like create some sort of like credit default swap or whatever it is. For me, I just come on here and I just like tap a couple of buttons, and now I have liquidity on my asset. Like, are those some of the use cases, and like what are some of the other use cases that you're just kind of like swirling around in your head with?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're really trying to do is a few things, right? Like this idea of access to different products, which maybe not be very easily accessible in your home country in the traditional, methods. In our ideal world, like everything should be accessible with your phone and your crypto wallet, right? And stable coins or whatever. Um, and I think for us, that's literally like I say it's building for me, but it's also definitely building for people who are not, a white American from the Midwest who have access to this stuff. If I just went home and, I live in Hong Kong right now. So if I just went home and used like a Schwab account or whatever, it would be very easy for me to buy, not tokenized, like Tesla securities or other types of, brokerage products. But for someone whom, maybe in the Philippines or in, Argentina or something like that, probably not. But those people definitely have stablecoin. They definitely have crypto wallets because they don't want to hold their own, native, currency. And they'd much rather hold that in a tokenized treasury or a tokenized Tesla share or something like that, right? But they are bound by the limits of their local, economies and their local infrastructure. So I think that access point is a really important thing that we look at. The other thing that I think you brought up is this idea of actually being able to have composability with your assets. This idea about being able to take out a loan against an asset, maybe a house, without having to go to the bank and ask for permission. I mean, if you have a robust lending and borrowing platform that can properly value real estate, that has proper oracles into the real world, you could actually take out a loan on in a permissionless smart contract and be able to do something that you wanted with it, right? Without having to go to the bank. That could be literally 24/7. we're looking at all different types of products. As I mentioned earlier, like we're super agnostic with what we want to tokenize. Some of the use cases that have been more low hanging fruit for us now have been centered around what I guess like we've seen the most uptake with. So like we're kind of probing in all these different areas, and then the people who are most excited about working with us, we test and again have that like litmus test of like, does this actually create value for the end user? Does this actually create value for the issuer? Is this just pure, marketing hype and bullshit, or are we actually doing something that matters? Are we going to get in trouble if we do this? That's another, big check mark on the litmus test that we need to make sure that it's good. And you have to rate these things on that scale and see what works. But we're exploring real estate tokenization, and I can talk a little bit more about those different details of the different products that we're trying to tokenize. We're doing things like IP and content, whether that's like talking to like an A-list movie producer who wants to tokenize a portion of his film catalog. You guys would have watched all of his movies. He doesn't want to sell the whole thing. He just wants a little bit of liquidity. But you can codify a lot of cool stuff into that. Maybe like a meet and greet experience, or memorabilia from some of the movies, or all these different types of things, tickets to the show, whatever it may be, right? That can all be codified in a smart contract. So not only are you getting like the actual economic value that the real world product or asset can bring in token form, but you also have other utility benefits that can be digital in nature, that then translate into the real world. Art's another one. Fractionalized art, so like Masterworks on-chain kind of thing. We're tokenizing the finance. I mean, okay, actually, I can't say that one. I'm glad I caught myself.
Feel so
Anyway,
comfortable on
very
here. It's
big
just like a conversation. Just let it go.
I know. Yeah, I'm glad I caught myself on that one. But there's all different types of ways that you can utilize this idea of tokenization to actually support interesting use cases. And again, we're trying to explore as many as possible, and just seeing where it goes. And it is a little bit of a test case. Like, I think the one thing I actually respect from FTX was like they just tried things in terms of products, and like some of them didn't work at all, but some of them were like these game changers for them. Like the interesting thing that really put FTX on the map back in the day was when they started doing Donald Trump up and down coins. Like that was the original prediction market, right? Like, and that really was like the product that was like, oh shit, actually these guys have a legitimate platform, decent liquidity, and they're doing like these cool products that no one else has. Great, let's go trade there. So that's kind of where we're at right now. Like we want to experiment, we want to get feedback from the community, we want to see what people actually want, what actually works, what's actually attractive. And all this stuff is new, right? And I mean it like not in the sense that we haven't tried this before, but like the mechanism and the actual like go to market for these products now is in a different form, right? Like before it was done in a centralized platform on a centralized exchange that probably wasn't retail accessible. Now all these things are changing. It's all coming on chain natively from day one. That's like a whole different ballgame. If there's composability with DeFi, even better. So there's a whole range of things that we're exploring and working on, which honestly, in my opinion, is the game changer.
How do you look at, I guess, counterparty risk with something that exists in the real world? You've got this digital representation of it. Like, for example, if I tokenized my house, and there's four separate people that own a share of my house, and then the house, cross fingers this doesn't happen, burns down, or there's an earthquake and it's severely damaged. How does, in a tradable environment, how do you know that real world asset is solid in a good position?
It's a great question. I mean, completely honestly, I don't have the answer. I would say though, assuming what I know from kind of other tokenization products, what I would assume would be that these types of products and assets, right? Like they're not permissionless totally. So like think about this, like what happens if I tokenize a house or tokenize buildings or whatever, and my wallet gets hacked and they get taken? Like, are they just now this other person's asset? Like, no,
Right.
not really. So you kind of have to have a little bit of, it's not totally like open DeFi and open permissionless like you would have in other, pure play crypto projects, like there has to be some degree of recourse. And that's actually quite important. The ability to like claw these things back in the case of malfeasance or things going wrong. One of the things that is definitely a challenge, and why honestly this shit is so freaking hard, is because of like edge cases like this. You have to include, how do we include insurance in this stuff? How do we make sure that, like, if we have 4 people who own a fractionalized house, like who is actually entitled to it if they want it? Or are they only purchasing like a portion of the equity, which then would have potential value appreciation, as well as maybe some like rental income or something like that? I don't know. So there's all different ways that you can slice this up. And honestly, I think what we're trying to do is just explore different ways that then become, the thing that works. And it's going to be a process, right? Like, we're literally exploring on-chain title deed transfers. So like literally working with a sovereign government, that the actual title deed is represented in a token, and it's, validated by the actual like sovereign state. But the first test of that is like one property. The next test of that would be fractionalizing that, right? The next test of that is, okay, trading it. So it's step by step by step by step. And that's why I mean, this shit is going to take time.
Yeah, no stress. No
And it's a
stress.
long game.
It only has to live on chain for hundreds of years too, by the way.
Yeah. Well, that's but good thing it's an immutable ledger.
Wow.
Like I was saying with that example there, like there's already real world examples of that happening, right? Like especially like if you go down to like the close to the beach here now, they're selling homes and you own 1/8 of that, and then it turns into like a little HOA. And so it's there's paperwork, right? And then there's title, and there's all of the interest that goes into that, and there's potentially a trust that owns that. But again, it's a lot of legal that needs to be paid. It's not just a click of a button, right? It's almost like this. Like I think it's just the experience disruption that's going to happen. It's kind of it's like taxis existed before Uber, but I couldn't just like press the button and see like the little car coming towards me, right?
Yeah.
Like once it's and again, I'll argue that figuring out a Web3 wallet extension is easier than maybe figuring out and like paying, it's like, hey, do you gonna pay the lawyer $15K to do this, or you just have to spend like 4 hours figuring out how to do this other thing? More people are going to start to figure out how to do this other thing. And it's just like a matter of time. And as one generation kind of ages out of being in control of that and the other generation ages in, you're going to see these disruptions. And so that's why I like where you guys are positioned as kind of the protocol layer for people that have innovative ideas that want to build on top of that, right? Like it seems like your job's just like, hey, how do I support all of these awesome builders that have all these crazy, awesome, innovative ideas? And how do we support them in cool ways to be building here? And like, I like that, and people might say like, oh, do we need another layer one? Can't we just do this somewhere else? It's like, well, it's purpose driven, right? And like, you're in control a little bit more of probably like what gas potentially looks like. And, if people are KYCing to come on, it makes sense to me because you need a different playground to play in. Like John's saying, he's not going to tokenize his house to a bunch of random people that he doesn't know at all, right? But like if you had a playground where everyone on that chain, like you said, was KYC'd, if for some reason the funds ended up in another wallet, you could go and figure out who that person is and like, how did John's house end up over there? And like, who is that person? And then you could close off that or like burn that wallet potentially if you could find that person and move it back. There's like solutions that can be made. And so I think you need a stepping stone of some centralization, but ease of use to get to a fully centralized, if you even end up ever being in a fully decentralized world for things like this, like real world assets.
For sure. I mean, we very, intentionally chose to have like a permissionless blockchain. So I do just want to say like the actual chain itself is permissionless, and there's a permissionless layer that anyone can read and write to the blockchain on. There's also a permission layer where a lot of these real world asset products are going to live and it be issued, but they can eventually move back and forth. But in order to redeem and bring them back to the real world, you'd have to come through the permission layer again. And for that, you would need to be onboarded in some form or some platform. The idea is to make this onboarding experience as seamless as possible. And also I just believe that like people in crypto don't necessarily dislike KYC. I mean, there's a fringe that doesn't, but honestly, everyone KYCs to get on exchanges nowadays. It's just the norm. What they don't like is doing it 100 times over for, to be able to just go, trade some random shitcoin on a different exchange, but they really want it, so they go do it. That's kind of a shitty user experience. In this instance, like if you create an on-chain infrastructure that allows you to kind of like passport your KYC, where you do it one time, and then you can use all the different products and you can interact with all the different places, and it's from the same wallet you're already using, your MetaMask, your Kepler, your Leap, whatever, or your Phantom, whatever it may be, of your wallet of choice, trust. Like, it just makes it a lot of an easier experience. Like I said, today we're building for the crypto native people because they're the ones who are going to buy this shit. Tomorrow we're building for the people who don't know about blockchains. They don't care about what the wallet is. They don't care about the underlying infrastructure. They don't care about any of this stuff. They just want something that's better for them. And if you firmly believe, like I do, that a tokenized representation, a self-custodial representation, and an on-chain representation of these products is more accessible, more equitable, brings more incentives, and potentially is just easier and a better user experience if you create all this infrastructure around it, like why would you not be building in this space? So like that's kind of why I'm again so excited about it, because if you are not just focusing on where we're at now, but like this new market that's maybe 5 maybe 10 years away, like that's everything on chain. So we haven't even started. I mean, like people talk about that analogy of where are we at with which inning are we at in the game of the crypto cycle? And probably now we're a little bit further along in the game just because Bitcoin ETF's approved, ETH is coming, and all these things. If you're coming about and talking about RWAs, I don't even think we're in, like we're still in the parking lot. The game hasn't even begun yet. So that in and of itself is just a very exciting thing as a builder to wrap your head around, because like there's still less than $1 billion of retail tokenized assets on permissionless blockchains. It's nothing. This is like a multi-trillion-dollar space.
Well, you've said a lot about there being a long way to go, basically, on this, and I guess how do you see that? If we're talking about crawl, walk, run, obviously, like maybe tokenizing a house fully with insurance and loan and all this stuff that's so wrapped up and entrenched in age-old processes, right? It's really hard to disrupt that at scale. So we're probably like in this experimental stage. But I'd be curious, like, what is the cadence of this, do you think, unfolding? Like, for example, like it's probably easier to do IP rights in some regard, or maybe tokenizing the stock market. That's also difficult, but the technology part of it to potentially trade stocks 24/7, 365, which it currently doesn't. Like, how do you see that kind of unfolding? Do you see physical objects last and more digitized things first, or I guess maybe the other way around?
Good question. I actually think that honestly, all this stuff will be imminent within the minimum next 12 months. I think we'll have 24/7 tokenized stock trading on chain. I think we'll have. I mean, I know, like I'm literally doing it. So I think I literally retweeted something because I'm speaking at Permissionless in Salt Lake City, and I think it's in October. And they just had a tweet that said announced me, and I had a kind of a joke at DAS London where I said I'm going to be airdropping an apartment at some point in time. And I actually firmly believe that literally within the next 6 to 12 months, I will actually airdrop an apartment to someone on chain within that time frame. So I think if that's just my opinion about how quickly this stuff is moving, and frankly, that's my opinion based off of just what we're actually doing. So this shit is moving quick in that sense. But does that become widely used, widely adopted, or is it still a niche thing that may get some headlines? And yeah, sure, we're going to have some adoption, but is it widely adopted? That's the thing that's going to take time. So I actually think that a lot of these products, whether it's real world, houses or infrastructure, things like this, honestly, is happening now. I mean, literally, we're working on projects today. Stocks and other things obviously are heavily regulated, so that is a different thing. If the U.S. can, figure its stuff out a little bit, I think that's an imminent thing as well. but is one going to go faster than the other? I think it all comes at once. It's just how quickly does this stuff get picked up widely spread? And honestly, it will also be a little bit jurisdiction by jurisdiction based. So we definitely take a bit of a US and rest of world approach. But even rest of world, you still need to know that like there's certain countries where you can't do stuff because the frameworks say this is how it's going to be. There's other countries where there's not a clear framework, so you just kind of just make sure you're doing it to the best of your ability, I guess. And then honestly speaking, it's a little bit like where do you want to accept the risk that this might be a problem? So
That was
ask
literally
for
my next
concern.
question.
Yeah, ask for
For
please,
you
please.
is was just going to the site, and if you're based in the US, it's like, hey, you can't use this right now.
Yeah.
As someone, you said you're from the Midwest, right? Like are you focused on it at all, the US yet? Is it something that you're inkling, like are there inroads that you're trying to make? Are there certain
Mm,
parts of the industry, like, hey, maybe you can't, securitize like your house yet, or maybe you can do a car,
mm,
maybe you can do something else? Are there different little things that you're trying to kind of get in there? And then, because it's like, it's obviously it's the largest market, there's so much
sure.
there, you want to test other stuff first, but like how are you kind of thinking about the approach of potentially cracking in there? Or are you just saying like, hey, we just wait until it is crystal clear that we can do this, and then we're going to be
Mm.
the leader everywhere else in the world, and so competitively, like, we'll come grab that the fastest?
It's a good question. I mean, we have intentionally taken this like rest of world approach. We focus heavily on Middle East and Asia. The test net for the chain is called Hongbai, as an allude to Hong Kong and Dubai, which is where we spend a lot of time. Um, and I think for me as an American, the US is like the ultimate gold standard of where I would want to be at some point in time. But the regulatory environment today, given our licensing position, doesn't allow that, which is fine. So we've been pretty cautious about how we do that, what type of products we offer there, et cetera, et cetera. I think that we're starting to see things shifting in the US. I think probably, if there ends up being a new administration next year, um, that will continue to change. I think people are like, it's very clear that the crypto industry has stood up to like this idea that they can't operate there effectively, and there's been a lot of effective lobbying going on, which has been really good to see. Um, Obviously, it's a long fight. We're not there just yet. Um, for us, the way that we kind of approach the U.S. market is a little bit of just a like slow and steady, and like we can see it thawing a little bit, then maybe it's not a let's go offer a bunch of products to Americans right now, but rather a how do we get on a US exchange? And particularly as an L1 token, that's like becoming more and more clear that that's a possibility. I think there's been some judgments that set precedent that, layer one blockchain tokens that are used as gas are, much more clearly seen as utility tokens and security tokens or securities. So that obviously becomes a lot more attractive, and it's something that we're obviously looking to be able to get into the hands of US folks at the right time, when a US exchange believes that we are of fit fit and proper for that market. So it's definitely something we're looking at actively and approaching in good conversations. But I don't think it's something like, oh, we're going to go set up shop and start whipping out RWAs for Americans tomorrow. As much as I would love to, it's just right now it would be a significant risk for us to do something like that.
I want to shift completely what we've been talking about a little bit. Earlier we were talking about the challenges of a startup, and that was awesome. That was great. I think we're a lot of, I'm going to go and not call these projects or coins. I'm going to call them brands. And it appears from the outside here that you guys have spent a lot of time building a brand. See the logo on your hat. Your website's amazing. Great content. You spend a lot of time pushing out what you're doing. I'd love to hear kind of what your brand building efforts look like, because I think a lot of these brands in this space, they're like seat of their pants, doing an AI logo online, launching tomorrow, launching their contract, and they're done. They don't take the time to really push it through. I guess, what are your efforts towards brand building?
It's a great question. So first off, I got to give a massive shout out to our head of design, head of UI UX, Kendi. That dude is a mastermind in terms of design and, brand positioning and whatnot. Um, so I think from that perspective, it's good that we just have a really strong team that at least just like visually and optically does creates an appealing product. But obviously, branding and positioning is much more than that. And it comes down to, in my opinion, like being very, very intentional with a number of different things. Like we have through our history, I'm just a very intentional person about it. Almost everything I do in life, I'm like, I'm pretty particular about certain things. Um, and as it pertains to Mantra and our brand, we have this history from 4 years that we launched as Mantra DAO, and then we rebranded, and then we have this like East Asian like 888 numerology, and like all these things are super significant about why we pick certain dates, why we do certain things, like why we have certain colors. Like all this stuff is incredibly intentional and all has a story. So I think from my perspective, like building Mantra's brand has been a journey in just intentional, like being very intentional with what we're doing, and then also just creating something that is like genuinely reflective of like myself, our team, the people who've worked with us in the past historically. Like it's all just that built up over time. And then being very, active in promoting and talking about it, and not just like promoting it from like a hype and narrative and like shill perspective, but you know talking about the different stories and creating like feeling and emotion about what we're doing. I think brands and communities in crypto, like they tend to follow people, um, as they should, right? People follow people, and that's such an important thing, and that's why I'm so public with the project. Like I said before, like this is my life, and having that come across, whether that's on Twitter in my community AMAs or on conversations like this, or when we're doing speeches or whatever it may be with the team in person, like that's like the people are the brand in my opinion, and we want to reflect that wherever we go.
It's important. You're building technology for the people to use, so you're humanizing it. It's
For sure,
important. It's great. It's good to hear.
for sure.
Yeah, where does that intentionality come from? Right? Like, why is it important to, like you said, like choose the dates correctly, choose the numbers
Mm,
correctly? Like, why do you think that? Because obviously, great design resonates with people, right? Like when you see
mm,
something, you're like, oh, that's beautiful, or that's pretty, or that makes me feel good. Like feng shui, like there's when you walk into a room and it feels right, you're happy, right? Like, is it just like being close to that with the way that you think about designing the world? Is it there is no other way. That's just the way you kind of deal with your life. Like, because a lot of people are just like, hey, let's just throw all this stuff out there. We're doing the right thing. Like people will gravitate towards it. It'll be great. It's like, well, if you're not really intentional, for some reason, those
mm.
things.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, I'm not sure I have a really profound answer, to be honest. I honestly just think it's kind of the way I am. um, and you know, I think by being, true to myself, being very genuine with what I like and what I care about, and what our team cares about, it allows you to come off in a very real way. Um, so, like, maybe it's just being a little bit weird for certain things, and just curious about other things. And this is why you did that, and that's why you did this, and you know, like bringing it all together into a story and a narrative. I mean, I think also part of it is just I literally think about this meaning Mantra, what we're building, what we're working on, problems that we're solving, challenges that we're facing from the minute I wake up until the minute I go to bed, every single day of the year. Um, and when you just are naturally like, it's the only thing you think about, um, you start being very intentional with it because you can't stop thinking about like the details.
Yeah.
Um, so it's I'm not saying this is the most healthy thing, to be completely honest. I mean, like this is obsession. Um, and when you're obsessed with something, then like you get into that level of granularity and detail. And when it comes to a crypto project, that obsession does, you know, come off, hopefully in a good way. Um, but it also has its downsides, right? Like, being obsessed with something also means you have to make sacrifices in other places.
Yeah, we could probably do a whole nother hour on what those
Yeah, absolutely good.
sacrifices would be as a founder. It's like family, friends, work, right? Like one thing's gonna suffer at some point. But yeah, man, we cranked an hour
Yeah.
here. John, you got anything else?
I was saying, I was just thinking as he was talking, it creates a culture of like iterative, like never ending iterative behavior that you have to manage through, and you're
100%.
doing it a lot in the public,
Yeah.
and it's so different than like if you worked for some large corporation that you have, I think you have larger releases, less frequent, more private. um it's surprise, it's live, our new phone's here, like it's very
Mm.
like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat versus like you're constantly launching little things, and
Mm.
that takes a cultural shift from every single person on the team to get
100%.
right. It's hard.
100%. I mean, I say pretty regularly, like, I would rather us to fail quickly and fail often so we can learn from it and fix the mistakes than like wait and, have something that's perfect, but it takes much longer and we haven't like learned many things along the way, because the value is in the learning. And the quicker we can ship, the quicker we can iterate, the quicker we can bring new things to the market, the better we'll be in the long run, at least in this like kind of stage that we're at. So completely agree with that. It's definitely a different, you know, cultural dynamic that you need to build. And that's another thing I'm super intentional about. I'm like incredibly intentional about the culture that we're trying to build. Incredibly. Like that's more than anything.
Yep.
So maybe that's a whole nother hour as well, because I could talk about that shit all day.
Tomorrow.
Well, no, man, this was a lot of fun. 4 years later, getting to see you, it's been great to catch up with you, and we're so happy that you're doing well and that you're pushing as hard as ever in the industry. The industry needs people like you, that are
Appreciate that.
focused, that are determined, that are on the right side of history with the way that you're building. So appreciate that, and I guess just let everyone know what to look forward to with Mantra and with you in the next month or so, and where to find you.
Absolutely. Well, first off, thank you so much for the time. Thanks for having me on. Really do appreciate it. We're in kind of the culmination of our build up to mainnet launch. We're super excited about that. We have new RWA partnerships coming. Mainnet launch, I'm saying publicly, is after the summer, before U.S. election, so imminently. Um, and as I mentioned earlier, like the things that we've been announcing are really just the tip of the iceberg. We have so many things that are not yet shared with the community, and we can't wait to bring them to market. We can't wait to share with you guys. So really exciting stuff for the rest of the year ahead. It's been a crazy whirlwind of a year so far, but the crazy part is it's only going to get crazier. So, hopefully we'll be able to come back in another 4 years time and share where we're at then, maybe a little bit sooner. But a lot of good stuff coming, and we'll hopefully be able to share it with the LunarCrush community as well.
Awesome. Well, JP Mullin, you rock. Thank you, man. Check him
Thank you,
out,
sir.
mantratrain.io. And then Mr. Farjo, as always, it's a pleasure. And thank you,
Yep, thanks.
everyone out there, for listening. This